This is the second in a series of professional development programs that we've set up, and they're called the Hard Facts About Soft Skills. There's so many things we need to know about soft skills, and I know many. How many were here? Not here. How many came to the event last month? Right. So a good number of you have already heard about this, and this is the second in the series, and I think networking is such an important topic. I think I know everybody here, but I'll just introduce myself. And I'm Linda Katz-Willner, and I'm the CEO of Successfully Speaking. I help you communicate with excellence and polish your professional presence, as well as feel comfortable and confident in your communication skills. I'm so excited to have a great panel here. We have Jim Reese, who does business development for Offit Kerman, Sarah Ryan, who's the community marketing leader for CQ Credit Union, and Eric Benzer, who's with he's Benzer Insurance Company. Let me clarify that name. And they're people who have done a lot of networking. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to hear some things from them. Before we dig into some of the questions, I want to ask you, what percentage of jobs do you think are filled by networking? Any thoughts? 85%. Anything else?
I was thinking about 80.
About 80. All right, so I think Carol read the statistics. It is 85%. Here's the next question. What percentage of people do you think network? I know what the answer should be, but what do you think the answer is? Any ideas?
10.
Well, actually, 75% of the people do some type of networking. But I think it should be 100% of people do networking, whether you're looking for a job or you have a job or you want to increase your business. Again, I'm always wary of statistics when people come out with these numbers and what it means. So the first question I really have is, what is networking? And I'm going to ask each of our esteemed panel members what networking is to them. So Jim, how would you describe networking?
Firstly, I'd like to add a third question.
Mm-hmm.
How many people really enjoy networking? So, how many people get a job from networking? How many people network? But how many people really enjoy networking, don't think it's awkward and uncomfortable?
What about this audience? Just take a
right.
poll.
Who actually enjoys networking?
I like the food.
That's a good.
Okay, so almost 50%.
Yeah. So networking to me is just a sort of a natural, organic way to build relationships through conversation. It never should feel forced. It never should be rehearsed. It should be just natural, organic conversation, and asking questions to the people that you're talking to learn about them. But it really has to be sincere. The results of which would be to build relationships and to meet people and to encourage growth in your business and in their business. So it's giving to get, but it's helping people. So it's never one-sided.
Which I think novices of networking, you can always see novices are people who are not comfortable with networking because it's, what am I going to say? What should I say? And as any type of communication, it's not one-sided. So that's a great point. Sarah, what do you think networking is?
Well, he stole my 2 words exactly, which are building relationships. To me, that's exactly what networking is. The only other thing that I would definitely add is to never have expectations of what you're going to get at the event, because you don't know who's going to be in that room or how open or receptive people might be at a certain event. So when I go to events, I'm just looking to be myself, to be genuine, and to walk away knowing the person personally. I might not know about their business by the time I leave that night, but making some point of connection where I can follow up with them is what networking would be considered.
And following up is a key, big part of network. I think that's what's missing for a lot of people, that follow up. And we'll talk more about that. Eric, what?
That wraps it up. To me, networking is investing in people. It's going out and giving of myself, of my time, to better understand who other people are, what their businesses are, who they are, and how I can help them. So that investment pays different dividends. It's meeting new people. It's learning about their business and opening up doors, not just for myself, but for the other people in my network. And I think the biggest dividend and the surprise dividend is that you actually make friends with people. And that's been the biggest surprise to me through all the networking I've done, is the depth of friendships that I've made.
And I think if you think about the friendships and relationships and don't focus on, did I get that person's business card, or are they going to do business with me? Because you never know where the business is going to come from. And speaking of business cards, I know I've had these conversations with most of you about this, because you do go to the networking events and you sit at a table and somebody will say, okay, here are my cards. And I must say, I've been doing this for a long time. I think most of them, not Sarah, but most of us have been doing this for many years. That used to be what you did at a networking event. You sat at a round table and everybody took their cards and you passed it around and you left, and it's like, who is this person? You know, Jim, what do you think? When is the best time, or what should be some of the rules of etiquette when you're talking about business cards and when you should share them?
Firstly, that's really one of my pet peeves.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple people that I see around at networking events that just walk up to folks and say, hey, I'm Joe, what's your name, what do you do, here's my card, can I have your card? And that's the first strike.
And what do you do with that card?
But I think, again, it has to be, the conversation has to be natural and organic. So as you're having a natural conversation with someone, asking about them personally or about their business, there's going to be maybe that awkward silence, and that might be a good time to say, hey, sounds really interesting. Do you have a card? Can we exchange cards? Something like that. But never right when you walk up to someone and stick a card in their face. So I think you wait a couple of minutes until there's that natural pause where it seems right, it feels right to exchange business cards.
And sometimes maybe it just doesn't feel right and you don't have to do that.
Correct.
Any other thoughts about that topic? Anything different?
How many people here have a business card with them today? Well, the ones that don't, you probably should. I think one of the most important things about networking is coming prepared, understanding where you're going, understanding what your goal for that particular event is, and being ready for somebody to ask you for your business card.
And I think making sure that business card is accessible. I mean, how many times, and I hate to say, it's happened to me, if I have them in my purse and I don't have pockets with my jacket. So men have that advantage if they have a pocket, or think about having a pocket where I know I have the card, but I put it in this case and now I can't find it in my purse, and that moment is lost and it just doesn't seem as natural. So you want to have them available. I love when you go to some conferences and you have I don't like that they have the tags down here, but the advantage is you can put all the business cards back there and it keeps you organized and have it accessible.
And if you're a guy and you wear a suit, there's this special little pocket down here that business cards fit into, and I just load them up, because you never know when you might have an opportunity. Like if there's a fishbowl and there's a prize at the end, I just put the whole stack in. It works.
Is that today's stack?
Yes,
I
got more in the car in
no
case I run out.
Today. We don't have a fishbowl. I never realized that was a fashion statement. So now maybe women designers need to think about how to set that
have
up,
that little
because
pocket there.
there are times I have no pockets. I have no pockets today. And so or in my slacks or in my jacket. So what do you do? I want to add something about business cards, because I think this is fascinating. And Carol Hayslip may know this already. But in different cultures, they treat business cards differently. And if you're dealing with somebody from an Asian culture, it's very important that you hand the card to them so it faces them, usually with two hands. And they're going to take it with two hands, but you don't take it and put it in your pocket. You need to look at it for a moment. Carol, is there anything you need to add to that?
You need to admire, you make some comment about it, and you never write on it. It would be, you'd be defacing the card when you do it.
So that's an important thing to know. If somebody shows up at a meeting and you're talking to them, and let's say they're from China or Asian culture, and you sit there and they say, here's the card, thank you. And that's just not the way to do it. Or you wouldn't be passing it around the table. It's an invitation, and it's almost an honor to give you a card, and I expect the same respect when you receive it. So that's an interesting tip to have when you're dealing with it. And doesn't it make sense that we should do that as well? Doesn't necessarily have to be the two hands, but that makes sense. Does anybody else have any comments about the business cards or when to exchange it or any?
I have one question. You talk about having your little pocket there. What do you do with the card when somebody gives you a card? 'Cause
It
I
goes
have
in a
mine
different
case.
pocket.
Okay, I have mine in a case, and so I always say make sure you got a case for, both one side that's empty to put somebody's business card in.
Because how many times do you find them in your person? Where did I meet this person at? I didn't.
I have a certain compartment in my purse for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
I think my problem is, and a big fear is when you're changing hats from, you've got to be on 24/7. And so that means you've always got to be ready, because so many times in a social setting, you get an opportunity for that connection.
Mm-hmm.
And then, oh, darn, I didn't carry them because you've lightened your load.
Mhm,
You're not
mhm.
carrying a bag necessarily, just your phone. And you forget the cards.
So you thought of that promotional item to put that sleeve on the back of your phone so you have access to
Yeah,
it.
we came up with that, and we've been giving them out, and you can put the cards right in the
In the
back.
wallet.
Mm-hmm.
I have that on the back of my phone, but when I'm at networking events, I have my phone away.
Right.
So I purposely don't leave my phone out.
That's true.
Another thing to think about networking is how do you organize all of your contacts and people you meet? And I have that question because, okay, I have the people I met at this event, and then I go to a different organization, an HR organization, and I get cards there. How do you keep track of all of that? Because all of you do a lot of networking. Sarah, what's your thought
So
about that?
at my company, we have internal resources. So we have the app where you can take a picture of the card front and back, and it uploads to our Salesforce system. And then I actually lay them out on my desk, and I separate them as to people I actually spoke with or those that might have handed them to me that I have no idea who they are, or if it is from a fishbowl. And they walk away, I might write on the back like what exactly we talked about or what they asked me to follow up with. So when they're not looking, it's okay to write on the back in my mind. But the most important thing is to make sure that you know which ones asked for the follow-up or were expecting to hear from you, or that you feel like you built a connection with and you could continue to nurture that relationship that you've built, versus the other stack that might just be for a slow day, cold calling, need to do a little more prospecting, don't know much about them.
Good point. Eric, what are your thoughts? What's your organization system?
It's still a work in progress.
Oh, absolutely.
I've got a lot of business cards on my desk. I also have a loose leaf, a binder that's got all the little
Little pockets.
pockets, thank you. But I keep them on my desk because I like to see who I met the day or the week before. I like to send them an email and tell them it was nice to meet them, and maybe get together and have coffee or breakfast or lunch. Try not to have dinner with people. I try to do it before that, because there's often a networking night event at night, and I like to have dinner with my wife every now and then. But I am in search of a better system.
Mhm.
The key is to just do something with them.
Right.
Doesn't matter what it is. There's probably better ways than others,
Mhm.
but to do nothing with them is the wrong thing to do.
And I used to keep the binder with the sleeves, and then it became so cumbersome. And you like to be mindful about how much paper you're holding on to. So I haven't figured out the system. And then I would put some in a pile and label that pile, because I found when I get rid of them and they're in my mailing list, let's say, or Salesforce, then you lose track of who they are, what they are, and they get lost if you have thousands of names. So I think that is a big challenge. I know, is it Cam? I'm trying to think of the app that I have on my phone. I think it's Cam, where you take the picture and it puts it in a group, and I think that's great. I haven't found the answer either. Jim, do you?
Well, I don't have a CRM, but what I do is if I go to multiple events in a day, which is not uncommon, I'll make a note on the business card where I met the person, and then when I get home, and if I'm talking to someone and it seems like, yeah, we should get together, I'll make a note and I'll just write meeting.
Mhm.
When I get home, I put them into groups. Everything goes into Outlook. I put it in myself, and in the notes section in Outlook, I put down, if I met them at Hunt Valley Business Forum event, I put Hunt Valley Business Forum and the date, and I link in with everybody I meet. So I'll leave, once I load everyone in Outlook and LinkedIn, then the ones that are left over where we talked about following up and grabbing coffee or something, or inviting them to event, then I'll follow up with emails and invite them to event or send them some dates for coffee or lunch.
I think it is a work in progress, like what's the best way?
I have a spreadsheet in Excel with all their email addresses, phone numbers, and then I have a comment section where I've met them, and I group them by the groups, like Hunt Valley Business Forum, and then I'll note if they also belong to another organization. So then I can do a group mailing if I want, because it's in Excel, and that seems to work pretty well for me.
Phil, did you have?
Yeah, so I have a comment on the question. So the comment is, I know they use Evernote. Evernote has a feature where you can take a picture of the card, and then it'll actually help you find the person on LinkedIn, so that if you want to make a connection with them, you can do both that way. The question is, though, with all the talk that there is about email and what's right and what's not in terms of spam and everything else, if somebody gives you a business card, is it okay to just put them on a distribution list or not? And I know that the distribution list has to have an unsubscribe feature, but you're sitting at a table. I mean, those are the worst. When you're sitting at the table, I've been to the Baltimore County Chamber at breakfast, and I'll get up and I'll come down and there's a business card. I don't even know whose card it was, right? But that person now, does that give me the right then to just add them to my list? What is everybody's thoughts about that?
Anybody have any immediate thoughts?
I would say yes.
I would say yes too.
Well, I can tell you, we use Constant Contact, and one time we had two companies sort of combined, and so a bunch of people that were interested in the one company got an email. I think I had 5 people or something that listed it as spam. I got a very curt email from Constant Contact telling me if that happened again, I could no longer be part of Constant Contact. So there are very specific rules about, you have to have permission, and every time I send out a Constant Contact, I have to check off something that says I have asked all of these people for permission. So I think they're pretty strict about it.
And MailChimp now does that. So when you manually add somebody, it says I have permission. So then the loose question is, what's permission?
Right.
Is giving you a card permission. My thought is people can always unsubscribe. And they don't have to open up.
Spam.
Well, with Constant Contact also, when you're unsubscribing, there's a bunch of different options as to why you're unsubscribing, and they use that information. One of them specifically is this information doesn't pertain to me. And if you have a lot of people clicking that, then that's a red flag for the account, and your account won't get shut down because they do not want any paid lists. They don't want to be infiltrating anybody's email systems without the proper, it's easy to click I do, but if somebody says this information doesn't pertain to me or I didn't ask for this, whatever, then that's when you're in hot water.
But sometimes I'll say, like, MailChimp does the same thing. And sometimes when you look at the reason, it's like the person, I don't know what, they pick something that isn't right. You see what they say and you know that wasn't right. But sometimes that can happen just because the person is, I don't want to see this, and that's they're going to pick the most offensive answer that they can,
So
and
if
it really
it's
wasn't spam or anything else.
Well, I think
I
it's
know
just
it's
one
or two,
person
it's
that's
not
not
I
going
understand,
to
but I'm
matter,
just
but
saying.
yeah.
If somebody gives me their business card,
Mhm.
it seems that they've given me permission to call them and email them. Maybe not text them, but certainly to call them and email them.
But that is that's a very sensitive area. And I know some people are up in arms, like, remove me from your list. It's like, okay, I had your name somehow. I must have met you someplace. And maybe I don't know everybody personally on my list because I don't know. If I speak to a group, I'll often say to them, I'll put you on my mailing list. Feel free to unsubscribe.
That's building your business. That's part of what you do. You reach out and touch as many people as possible.
And they are handing you their information.
Yeah.
Well, heck, if you're at a network.
It's
Isn't that the premise?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would think
So
so.
Any other-
somebody just kindly, that's the big thing is that we're all saying, it's how you,
I mean, I've certainly never asked somebody if I could call them.
But you're not gonna
but-
call
but
them
so
every
why
month.
ask them if you can email them? But
Right.
then there's spam, and that's the feature that we don't have control over, that people can report it. They don't have to answer their phone, and there's nobody to report, right? We can't report all, we could we could block that number, but
Well, there's also a difference between getting a phone call and then every month or every other week
Get a
getting
Five
newsletter,
days a
a
week.
newsletter or something.
person.
And the other risk that you run with email and stuff, even if you're using Outlook, if you're sending things, and even if people aren't unsubscribing, but they're moving it, deleting it, or creating rules in their Outlook, then you're getting your IP address, running the chances of that being blacklisted. So then your emails might not be going to anybody that you're sending them to, because the World Wide Web is seeing you as sending out spam or things that people don't like.
it's very discouraging to hear all of this, but I think those are the facts of we have to adhere to. Let's switch gears for a moment and think about, we're going to a networking meeting. What are some things that we should think about as how we create a good first impression? Sarah, what are your thoughts about that?
So everyone who knows me knows that you always have to smile. So I think that just having a genuine smile, it makes you more approachable, and it creates a great first impression because they will remember that you truly wanted to hear from them and listen to them, which leads to my second thing, which would be listening. Networking is not always about you. So if you have that smile on and then your ears are open to learn about them, those are definitely two things I always remember to do when I am networking.
And that reminds me of the Dale Carnegie quote that Jim always quotes, and that is to be what?
Interested, not interesting.
Right. Think about that. Be interested in that other person. It's not about being interesting. Let them pull that out of you and ask you, but focus on being interested in them. Because sometimes if you listen, and those of you who know what I do a lot of work with listening skills. If you listen, that person thought you were the best conversationalist when they left, and you didn't say a thing but ask questions about them. Because we all like to talk about ourselves. And then you may leave the event and say, oh boy, they didn't ask a question about me. Well, that's the chance you take, but yet they're thinking a lot of you because you did ask those questions.
Another first
Stacey?
impression for me is the handshake,
Mm-hmm.
and I was talking to Ms. Hazlett about it. But if someone doesn't have a nice firm handshake, that first impression for me is not a good one.
And what if they have a very firm handshake?
Ooh, yeah. Well, if it's crushing, that's the opposite. But a nice firm handshake really gives me a good first impression.
But my point also is that firm handshake can also, the very firm handshake can give the impression like, why is he overpowering me with a handshake? And then you also have to know your audience. Some people are going to say, as Larry's experienced, that, boy, that was a strong handshake. And then if you've never heard it from other people, you start to wonder about that person. That's another cultural piece, right? Different cultures. In some cultures, when they take the hand of a woman, it's very different from a man. And I did a workshop where somebody said, the best thing I got out of your workshop was he wasn't American born. I didn't realize I should shake the hand of a woman the same as a man. So those are things, there are going to be cultural differences. So give somebody a little, some leeway if you get that type of handshake from somebody from a Mideastern culture or an Asian culture, because that's, right, Carol? I mean, that's,
Yeah. Well, it may not be appropriate to shake somebody's hand from
that too.
another culture, depending.
That too.
Orthodox Jews.
Mhm.
Yes, well, yeah.
Be very aware of that.
Yeah.
If they're not putting out their hand, they may
Well,
be.
that's
aggressive.
right.
You
But
wait for
I mean,
them.
just to
Yes,
extend
you
it,
wait for them to extend it.
And if you don't know and you extend it and they don't do anything.
like I know to ask an Orthodox man if he even shakes
Mm-hmm.
and go from there. But, you know, just a run of the mill, you meet a man
Mm-hmm.
and they give you a kind of wussy handshake.
And here are the thoughts about handshakes.
We were having a side conversation about a hug versus a handshake.
Oh, nice. Yes.
And I know that's a big topic. But
So what are the standards for hugs versus handshakes?
I think you need to be extremely careful.
Mm-hmm.
I think the venue is really important where you're going to be exchanging it, and you try to hopefully have 20/20 vision on the body language that the person is giving you. There's the huggers, and I do hug women and men when I see them. I probably kiss more women's cheeks than men's cheeks, but I think it is, you need to be careful. Not only because of the time that we're in, but it's all about respect. And I think at the end of the day, one of the key parts of the DNA of networking is respect, and it comes in a lot of different areas. Putting your phone away, not overstepping their boundaries or getting in somebody's personal space, listening. One of the things that I always do before I go to a networking event is I brush my teeth. I try to look professional. And you can have jeans on and look professional, it depends where you're going. But I am not only representing myself and my company, but the people who work for me. And networking is a marathon, it's not a sprint.
And be comfortable in what you're wearing. So if you're wearing the shoes that you can't walk in, and you feel like you need to lean against the wall, that's not good. But some women may say, I feel better when I wear heels. I know I've presented with flat shoes and I've presented with heels. I can't present in flat shoes. I just know I don't feel the same way. And some people may feel that about a different article of clothing. But by all means, wear something you're comfortable with. Not that you have to feel that you're shielding it or closing yourself off.
And you do become friends, and next thing you know, you're going out to dinner on a Saturday night with somebody that you have networked with and become friends with. You meet their spouse. You might give them a hug and a kiss on a Saturday night. Hello, nice to see you. That doesn't mean you necessarily need to be doing it at the Tuesday night networking event. You do need to have some boundaries and just think about what you're doing.
And the biggest thing is observe. So if somebody reaches out, then maybe you would hug them. If somebody seems real closed off, you're not going to want
Absolutely.
to do that. And if somebody, even personal space, is backing up a little bit, maybe because, and I keep going back to the different cultures because we have to be aware of that. If somebody's backing up as you're getting really close to them or leaning back as you're getting close, you've invaded their space. Just observe it. It's so important to observe it and don't keep insisting on what's comfortable for you if they're not comfortable. And I think male to female, you have more issues. But even women, I've gone to some events and a woman I hardly know would say, oh, I'm just a hugger. Well, you could be a hugger, but we don't even really know each other. And that doesn't feel comfortable to me. So again, just observe. Pick up those signals.
And I think you also need to observe other people that are really good at networking. And you can learn a lot from your friends. I've learned a lot from the gentleman on the end there. Be comfortable in who you are. Be comfortable to ask questions. And we're all a work in progress. Some things work and some things work less.
I have a weakness for World War II veterans. I'm sorry. I
Mhm.
need to hug them. I'm sorry. But I asked permission first.
World War II veterans.
I just
So
have
this-
a weakness for them.
The
I'm
same
sorry.
way, this isn't really the same thing, but the same way as if you see, what do they call those dogs? A service dog.
Oh,
You
yeah.
ask before
Oh,
you
yeah. Oh,
touch.
yeah.
I mean, there are different reasons for that, but don't just assume. But be aware of your surroundings and what might be appropriate.
I would add to prepare for a networking event. I've got one coming up in a couple of weeks, and I've already received the registration list, so I know who's coming. I know how many people are coming. It's helpful if you can get that list. It's helpful to arrive early because on time is sort of late. Arrive early. You can always look at the badges on the table and see who's coming if you didn't get that list in advance. My expectations when I go to an event is to walk away with 3 meaningful business cards, not 30, just 3. So it's not speed dating. There are some speed networking events that we've all been to, but generally speaking, you should have 3 meaningful conversations and walk away with 3 meaningful business cards. I think that's a fair expectation and a fair goal. That way you're not jumping from one conversation to another.
And right, I've heard strategies where you do a Z with a room and then you cover as many people. Well, did you really have valuable conversations, or were you depositing your card throughout the room? And that says something about who you are too, right? Let's say you get to a networking event and you go to this mega networking event. It doesn't have to be the mega ones we have here. But you get to a networking event and the room is filled with people and you're showing up alone. And I usually go alone to networking events because it also pushes you to go out there and meet people and not just be with your buddy. Although we have a concept, Larry and I have talked about this, about the lily pad concept, where you go on your own and then networking could be draining, right? It certainly could be draining. Periodically you have a friend or somebody else at that event and then you go to rest on that lily pad for a few minutes, or you take advantage of who that person's talking to and join that conversation, and then you jump off the pad and you go back out. And I think it's a great analogy for how you can maneuver yourself in a networking event if you know somebody. I'm so tired of talking to all these new people. Let me go over and talk to Sarah a little bit. And it's not always about work, but talk, and then you rejuvenate yourself and go to somebody else. What are the strategies if you show up at an event? I know you said get there early, Jim, which I think is a great strategy. But you get to an event and you see a room full of people. What do you do? How do you start networking? You're there alone and you see a room full of people and you're assuming, oh, they all know people. How do I navigate the waters here, so to speak?
Well, if I go to a room and there's hardly anybody there that I know I'm in the right place.
That's a good thing, right?
That's a really good thing. I might use the bar. I don't drink at events. I might have a beer, but I certainly don't drink at events.
Whole story, right?
Or go to the food table. That's often a way to use it as an icebreaker. I'm less than shy, so it's somewhat easy for me to engage somebody, but it's never about insurance, because that makes people run. I'm also a lawyer. That makes them run faster. So I just try to engage people. And if I do go someplace and I see somebody I know, then I walk over to them and I say hello. And when you have friends who are at different events, you do use that analogy that you used and you get introduced to people. There are times you go to an event and you're there for 3 minutes and you know this is not going to be a good event. We went to a breakfast together not too long ago and we saw each other on the other side of the room. The first thing we said to each other after hello was, this is time we're never getting back.
Right.
What makes it a not good event?
Sometimes it's the people, sadly to say. Sometimes it is the mix of people. There are organizations that try to collaborate with other organizations to do joint events, and sometimes it's more instead of milk and cookies, olive oil and vinegar. It just doesn't mix really well. But for the most part, it's rare that you go someplace that you don't have, as Jim said, 3 good conversations with people. And even if it isn't somebody new, there's always an opportunity to peel back that onion deeper with somebody who you already know, because it is ultimately about developing deep relationships. And I might have 2 or 3 people that I'm trying to help. And if I bump into one of these 2 stars, I've got something on my head. I've got an agenda for somebody else. It isn't always my personal agenda. I don't go to sell insurance. I go to either open doors for myself or other people. That's really what networking is a big word that I think is often overused
Or misused.
What these 2 do in their titles, the business development community development. That's really what it's all about. That outreach, that opening doors for your business, not selling. He wrote something recently about
We have it here.
Oh.
Yeah, we have it
how
here.
convenient.
Good segue, but we're not ready for it yet.
When you're talking about good events versus bad events, I always look at the timing of the event. So you know that it's a different crowd in a morning versus if it's at a happy hour in a bar.
Absolutely.
It's going to be louder. People might be a little more libatious with cocktails or food, and they might be eating more than they're worried about networking. I also try and look at who's on the board. So to be completely honest, before I joined the Hunt Valley Business Forum, I looked at who was on the board and who were the members on the website, and are those companies that I personally and professionally want to align myself with. And then the other thing that I do look at is the attendee list. So who's going to be there? Maybe who's sponsoring it? Is there someone from that company that's sponsoring it that I'm trying to meet? And that's a great segue into opening a conversation with them. Thank you for sponsoring this event. I'm so glad to be here today. So those are just a couple things that I look at when we're determining what are good versus bad events to be at. I know I went off on a
No,
tangent,
that's fine.
but
No, this is fine. I'm just trying to remember certain things that I wanted to ask because we were talking about showing up, and so Eric said, go to the bar or stand near the bar or stand near the food, which I think is an easy because you could talk about the food or what looks good or have you tried this or something that just makes it easier to have a conversation. What about, and I'm all about body language and observing. Let's talk a little bit about how do you walk up to somebody? What are some of the things you should be paying attention to? Because I've been in networking events where I just one recently where I was talking to one person, one-on-one. She was interested in some work that I was doing, and it was a really important conversation. I wasn't pushing the work, but she was asking me all these questions. And somebody walked right in, handed her card to both of us. And I was like, are you kidding me? And that person was gone. I had to contact them later, but they ruined or they interfered with my moment.
You didn't tell him, are you kidding me, right?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm telling you.
Okay.
Are you kidding me? So what are some of the things you should observe when you're at a networking event?
You can tell when two people are talking or three people, it's either an open conversation based on how they're standing or it's closed. If they're standing, feet to feet, face to face, that's a closed conversation and you should probably stay away or wait until there's a break. You see people when you're having a one-on-one conversation, we call them woodpeckers, and they want to peck right in and jump in the middle of your conversation. But people are standing toe to toe. You have to come back later. There are other people who, when they see that, they circle the wagons. They just keep walking around. If people look open and they're not necessarily toe to toe, then they're open for a third person to come in and have a conversation. But if I'm in a conversation with someone and it's getting pretty detailed, we're pretty much toe to toe, and it'd be wrong to just bust in and disrupt the conversation. So you have to look at that body language, exactly how they're facing each other.
And what if you are that way? Jim, we're at a meeting, we're at a networking meeting, we're talking to each other, toe to toe, looking and having a conversation, and somebody comes in. How do you deal with that? Or do you?
I just keep talking.
Keep talking to the person.
Uh-huh.
Right. And there are some people who are clueless and don't pick up on those clues. And what can you do? So I think it's very important to look at the body language. The feet are one thing. Now, if you have a group of three people talking and you think, oh, I shouldn't, hopefully you should say, let me observe and see if I should walk up there. But if one person even looks up to you, forget about the feet, that's the first thing you should be looking at. But if one person looks up and smiles at you, well, that could also be an invitation. But by all means, don't get in there and start talking right away. That goes back to listening. Listen. It's not just all about you, well, let me tell you what I do. That's the turn off right away, everybody.
What do you guys do though if you ever feel like the whole room is toe to toe and you're like, I'm the only one that's not in a toe? How do you? What are some of your
there's a good chance, and this has happened to all of us. You ever been stuck in a conversation where you feel like you're being held hostage and you can't wait to break away? They're loving it if you walk up there. There is a chance that someone's like, oh my God, thank God, you know.
That's right.
And here comes a third person. Great, take my spot because I'm out of here. So that can happen too.
And that leads to a great point. How do you end, like you're at a networking event, you walked up to somebody, because the other strategy is walk up to somebody who's all by themselves.
Yep.
They will love that you walked up to them. You may regret that you walked up to them. And so how do you deal with, okay, this is fine, I spoke with them, I need to move on. What are some ways to exit that conversation, especially when it's two people?
That's often a great opportunity to ask them for their business card and to say, you know, I'll follow up with you next week. Maybe we can get together for coffee or breakfast or something. But you can get hijacked at an event, and you need to be able to extricate yourself from that often suffocating conversation and just say, listen, this is great. There's a few other people here I want to meet. My time is kind of precious tonight. I'd like to get home see my wife, or I have a meeting or whatever. So I think that being authentic and respectful goes a long way. If they don't appreciate that or see through it, I don't necessarily mean shame on them, but I know that I've treated them appropriately.
Good. And any other strategies? If all else,
Isn't that where it's helpful? If you have somebody else with you, and you have a way that you can signal each
signal.
other, and so that they can come and help you get out.
That's a good point, and I think we only touched on it, but the beauty of groups and associations like Hunt Valley Business Forum is you've already got a common thread with people that are in the room. So if you go to Baltimore County Chamber event and you see one of your friends from Hunt Valley Business Forum, you can tag team, and that's not a bad thing, because you'll meet people that you can introduce to your friend, or they'll meet people there that they can introduce to you. So tag team is a great idea, and that's, I think, one of the values of Hunt Valley Business Forum or the various chambers, because you've got that common thread.
and Carol,
I was going to say, I like to remind people that it's not your job to make sure that everybody has somebody to talk to. You know, you are there to network. They're supposed to be there to network. So as long as you, as you said, respectfully say, you know, it's been great meeting you. I'm not happy unless I walk out of here with 3 business cards, so I got to keep moving. You know, it's okay to do that. A lot of people feel guilty because they're leaving that person by themselves, and now they have to find somebody else to talk to.
and you can always find not always, another option is, Carol, it's been really nice talking to you. I'd like to introduce you to somebody. I think this would have some really good connection for you, and then extricate yourself.
Now paybacks may come later.
Right. Hopefully it's appropriate. To me, when all else fails, you can also say, I know we're here to meet a lot of people. It was great meeting you, and let's see if we can move on to other people. And if that doesn't work, or that doesn't seem appropriate, you can always use the bathroom break.
Or the bar
Let me tell
break.
you, you can
Right.
always say, I just need to excuse myself for a minute. I have to go to the ladies' room. That's when all else fails. So there are some strategies.
Bye, Pam.
That's what I'll do. Let's take a moment just to look at something to get a sense. Jim found some great videos to just give you a sense, a little bit, possibly exaggeration, on what goes on
Possibly.
in events. I'm leaving that open to people's. So let's take a look at this. So here's the wallflower over there, and it's like, should I go up? Should I go up and talk to her? She seems all by herself, although she's certainly shutting herself off a little bit by reading something.
Hello there, Roger Metcalf. How are you, Beryl?
Actually, it's Betty.
Yes, of course. Having a good time, are you?
Oh, yes.
Meeting lots of interesting people. I've spoken to dozens of people today, I can tell you, and given out lots of cards, in fact, yes. So tell me, Barbara, what do you do then?
Actually, it's Betty.
Yes. I'm a marketing executive, you know, working a lot with blue chip companies at the moment and making quite an impression in the States, I can tell you, yes.
That sounds very interesting.
Yes, it is.
I'm in marketing too.
Well, that's
You know,
marvellous, Beryl. I'm sure my business could help you. Yes, in fact, we're helping so many businesses at the moment, you can't afford to miss out. Look, let me give you my card. Give me a call sometime, and I'm sure we can do business.
Actually, can I give you my card?
Oh, yes, of course. There, thank you. Yes, you know, if you're spending money on marketing, Beryl, then I'm your man.
Well, it sounds very interesting, this marketing. So tell me, what exactly...
That guy over there. Oh, a multi-million-pound player, I can tell you. Have to give him my card.
Nice meeting you too.
Do we have to say anything more? So again, it's not all about you. What are the things that you see wrong that he did?
You should say, what did he do right?
What did he do right? What did he do anything right?
He didn't acknowledge her colorful card.
He had a business card. That was probably the only
Okay,
thing.
yeah.
He showed up
And he
and
made
he had a
the attempt
business
to
card.
meet somebody.
Dress professionally.
All about him.
Right, all about him. And interrupting. And sometimes we want to interrupt because that person doesn't stop talking, but you have to find a way to do that. And sometimes even the gesture of, let me tell you something about how that relates to what you're talking about. But even this subtle stop sign. Now, I don't think he would have observed that. But those are some things I certainly would try. All right, we'll show, we have another one coming up, but we'll talk a little bit more before we do that. Anything else that you think about with networking that we haven't yet talked about?
You asked about icebreakers. It's not a bad thing when you're getting ready to go to an event. Think of an icebreaker. You know, typically we talk about weather or traffic or sports or probably not politics. Probably not a good idea today. But there, you know, you might come up with an interesting icebreaker. Also, it's a fairly common question to ask. So, what brings you here today? That's a little bit canned, but you could come up with something interesting, maybe based on a current event or a newsworthy event that's occurred recently. You know, oh, did you read about the awful apartment fire? Wasn't that terrible? You know, it was in Parkville or whatever. Where do you live? And that's a good segue into finding out more about somebody.
Yes.
I was at a networking event last week or the week before by myself. I was talking to someone and I couldn't get away from this person. And I said, I'm going to go over to this booth. Do you want to walk over with me? Just to end the conversation, got to the booth and then was able to start going off by myself.
So
It's another way
physically.
to maybe get yourself out of the conversation and start doing your own thing.
And something that Jim mentioned about being prepared, like with an icebreaker. How many of you have ever heard of the book, The Fine Art of Small Talk? Deborah Fine wrote this book, and I give this to a lot of my clients. She had some wonderful strategies. One strategy is have 3 questions or 2 or 3 questions in your mind before you walk into that event. So if it's, there was an apartment fire, okay, I'll mention something about that. Or whatever, if you have some prepared, you may not even use them, but you have something to fall back on. Another thing is take advantage of free information. And what do I mean by free information? Now, it may not happen in a networking event that somebody's wearing a shirt that has the name of a college on it, but networking events come in all different kinds. So if you see that it says Penn State, well, that's free information. You didn't even have to talk to them yet, and you can talk about Penn State. Who went to Penn State? Do you follow? Yeah, those are great openings.
We are.
We are, right. Great openings to have. If somebody is wearing a nice colored jacket, comment on the jacket. It's not, and I think men can do this, and it's very safe. You know, that's a great color. I really like that jacket. Or look at that pin. Did you buy that locally or whatever it may be? Free information is so helpful. It also goes along the lines of a photograph. You know, if you walk into their office and you see a picture of a family member skiing, oh, do you like skiing? Or who is that? If the picture's out there, it's out for discussion, right? So hopefully it's not, and I've sometimes commented on a picture and I got more of the story than I wanted. But those are some options. So look all around you for free information. Even I've gone to events where people comment, what do you use on your hair? You have curly hair, and so do I. What's the product? That's a great way to start a conversation.
I
It's
get
easy.
that all the
I was
time.
gonna say,
All the
Jen,
all the time.
It's a great,
It's a great
starter, right?
conversation.
So look around for free information, because we all like, or I can't believe I didn't bring a sweater today. It's freezing in this room. What do you think? They're easy, and it's easy for you to use those, and it gets something started. Any other ideas for free information or networking questions or comments?
Because you talked about the apartment fire, I usually suggest that you not talk about negative or sad things, because you don't want the person to kind of walk away and say, wow, that was really depressing. So I'm interested that you said you talk about an apartment fire. I mean, which usually are like the bombings in Sri Lanka, which I was thinking, I mean, that's sort of the headlines now, but you know, it can be really a downer.
Unless you create a positive, like the fire at Notre Dame was devastating, yet the money that's already
Response,
been
yeah.
contributed, they really think that they can make that goal, you know, a
To flip
5-year
it.
goal, or let's just say, not to count, you know, yes, it is devastating news, although.
especially if you go up to somebody and you say, how about that fire at Notre Dame? And they're like, what was that? You know, you can get some tremendous insight into people who don't watch the news, who don't read a book, who, you know, are
Hard to talk to.
hard to talk to. And if you live in Baltimore, it's where'd you go to high school?
Right.
I mean, that's always
And if you're not from Baltimore,
Then
it's
you've
like,
just-
really?
really what are you asking that question for?
What
Absolutely.
neighborhood do you live in Baltimore?
Or are you from Baltimore? What do you think is different? Or you moved here. How do you see Baltimore as a city? Now that may be a downer for some people, or it could be something uplifting, but what do you like about that? Or have you been to this venue before for a meeting? What do you think of it? I mean, there's so many, you just look around and there's so much we can talk about. Not like, do you want to do business with me? You know, here's my card. And it's amazing that some people haven't been able to use those skills and they're still just passing the card out.
I'm often interested in where other people network and what works for them. It's bigger than just chambers. There are civic organizations and charitable organizations, and being part of the community and making your footprint in the community is more than just going to networking events. It's giving of yourself, giving of your time. You never know who you can meet at a fundraising event or at a charitable organization. It's bigger than just the happy hour, the breakfast, the chamber. Those are all great events, but I want to know where these guys are networking and where the people who I'm meeting are finding successful vehicles to meet new people and engage themselves.
Any comments on that?
He's right on.
So 2 things that I have done are volunteering. So it goes to your civic works or fundraising. You can always put on a company t-shirt, market yourself, get your hands dirty if you're building a house or volunteering at a soup kitchen, and network with the other companies or individuals that might be there that day. And then the other thing is, I think outside of the box with going to events that you might not think a credit union would want to be at. So the CHRA is an example. We need human resources to hire people at CQ, but we are actually there because we know so many company HR reps are there that we have an employee benefit program we might be able to help them with. So we're not there for the credits. We're there to meet the individuals who are attending that conference. I'm trying to think of another example of an event. I don't know if either of you have.
How about hosting events?
Mm-hmm.
Do you create your own
Eric
events?
does a lot with that. Right, you do a lot of the.
Well, very few people wake up and think that they want to go to an insurance agency that day. But we try to host different types of events, whether it be wine tastings or jewelry events or chocolate events. We try to engage our strategic partners and our friends with our agency to do different things. And it's all about building friendships. People won't do business with you unless they know you and they like you and they trust you. That seems to be the basic trilogy of doing business with somebody. But people will give you business if they're your friend. People will recommend you to their friends and family. And when I think, one of the hard parts is when you know as many people as we know, how do you juggle all those contacts? Who's your go-to realtor? I mean, how many realtors do we know? Or how many insurance people do we know? Or how many lawyers do we know?
Comes down to who you have relationships with,
and
who you think is a good fit for that next person, because it may not always be the same individual.
Right. If I send a client to Jim for Offit Kerman, I know it's not just about billable hours. I know it's about providing a comprehensive representation for their needs, and that they can go there and get more than just the one specific need that they have. Because often when you're engaging somebody, it's an onion. You peel it back, and they might have gone there for a contract matter, but they could very well have a regulatory matter or have this great idea of a business that they're trying to get off the ground, and they might need to go into the IP department or an estate issue, or they have banking, and all of a sudden now it's business banking, and it just keeps growing and growing. So, if I would recommend my parents or my employees to go someplace, then that's a good place to go.
We're coming up to the hour, and we can talk for hours about this. It's really interesting, the different insight we have from this great panel of experts. I want to show one more video and wrap this up, and then we can be here till 10 o'clock and discuss some things more. But let's just take a look at this video and see if this person's any better.
So, you were saying? Yeah, well, initially we were trading locally, in London and the South East, but I felt that there was such a lot of potential in the North. And it was a friend of mine, Paul, who said to me, well, why don't you come up and sort of open a practice there? And I was really quite happy about it. But, I had things to talk about, of course, and then, I had to decide on whether I was really going to go ahead with it anyway, Definitely. I've just seen a friend of mine, Stuart, who's about to go. Maybe I could catch you later and we can continue this conversation. See you. It's a rude man.
What was wrong there? Yeah, the body language. But sometimes you can use that body language to say, it's time to move on. Like, did you ever talk to somebody and they're doing that? I know I'm done with that conversation. It's time to move on. So again, observe it. It's not always, sometimes people do it intentionally. It may be rude, but to end a conversation. Again, observe what's going on. Any other comments about this one?
So do you think the guy was more wrong? I actually thought that it was she who was giving off.
Because they were wondering, who's she looking at?
Right. If you're in a room with a lot of people, of course your eyes might wander a tad. But if I'm having a conversation, I'm in this conversation and I'm not looking all around. If somebody's head is on a swivel, I'm out of there. I've lost them and they have lost me.
They're looking for somebody better or somebody
that
another
opportunistic.
opportunity. Right.
Yeah.
Like somebody's walking in the door. But as the listener, you also, and he did observe that and say, okay, I'm moving on. So
Correct.
it's a combination. He was also doing a lot of talking and she wasn't.
Yeah, he's a definite talker.
Right. He's the talk. So you have to start to say, it's two-sided. So it can come from both directions. It's also knowing when to exit, right? And when you know it's going to be a fruitful interchange and when it's going nowhere. Because we have met the ones that go nowhere and we don't want to stay there for the hour of the event. We need to find those graceful exits. Is there anything else that there's so much we can talk about. Any other, let's think of one thing. Let's do a takeaway. Eric, what would you say is one hard fact about soft skills related to networking?
Be authentic. Just be authentic. Don't be afraid to go and be yourself. And there's nothing to it but to do it. Just go do it.
Okay, great. Sarah, do you have something else?
I was going to say the same thing. Be you, because they'll catch on if you're being fake. and not engaging.
And the smile on your face has to be a sincere smile, right? Do you know how to tell when a smile is sincere? No. What makes it sincere?
Your eyes.
Your eyes. If it goes all the way up
She
to
said
the
that
eyes,
last Monday.
and you get
I cheated.
I
cheated.
If it's in the eyes,
But you showed up, and that's
you
why you
do
learned
Shane,
it, right?
you do Shane smile. It goes to your eyes. Your eyes, the crow's feet are there for a reason. That shows it's a genuine smile. The smile where I'm just smiling with my mouth doesn't feel sincere. It feels very plastic. And we talked about plastic surgery having another influence on that. But the sincere smile lights up the whole face, and you see it in people. You know when they have it, and you know the people who walk in the events and they have that fake smile. It just doesn't feel right. Right, Jim, what's your hard fact about soft skills?
I always try to wear cool socks. Actually, no, but the be yourself, authentic, all of that. And something we haven't talked about that I think could be very important in today's world, and it goes a little bit to the point you made about the negative, talking about the negative, is people like to see vulnerability, especially in today's world. So it would, to me, it's not the worst thing to talk about something that's negative and show that you have compassion and feelings about it, because people want to see that. We're training our attorneys to be more authentic and more compassionate and more vulnerable in their writings, because people relate to that. So you could be talking, oftentimes we're more willing to share with strangers things that we don't share with friends. It could be about something awful that someone in your family is going through, or a friend, or something like that. And I think people are really attracted to vulnerabilities because it shows that they're human.
Empathetic.
Yeah.
Empathetic, and to limit it and watch the person you're speaking with, because maybe you're talking too long about that and they're ready to be done, or you're pouring out your heart and maybe it's not the right place. So know how to temper that and watch your listener and see if they're asking more questions and we're engaged, but if they're getting really uncomfortable and fidgety about that, observe it as you're telling somebody a story. It's so important. I can't get away from my Olay approach to communication, which is observe, listen in order to engage. Because without the observing and listening, it's a one-man show, a one-woman show, and that's not what communication's about.